So as I said, we're going to start the morning with a discussion from a few different perspectives. And the idea is to just to talk a little bit about the big picture and where things are going in general, just to give you a sense of the things that you should be looking at over the next couple of days. You were going to put people's names up on the screen, I think, if I remember correctly. So good. So we don't need to go through who everybody. They all know who you are, so we can skip over that sort of part. So let's start by talking about let's start by talking about that big picture. So if you look at the breakdown of payments in Europe at the moment, I actually have the actual numbers here, but it's sort of boring to go through them. But cards still dominate, but we see some fairly big changes coming. I'm thinking mainly about A2A, but also BNPL and whatever. So let's begin. So can you just share your feelings about the overall trends? Who wants to kick it off? Any of you?
Actually, I'm happy to start. So as a merchant, and the merchant who is paying the payment fees, we would actually...
We don't have to hear that every single time, okay?
I'm sorry to talk about fees. I won't say the F word anymore. But let's say that we mentioned APMs. That's super, super important for us. And I think we've always been waiting for the day where things do flip around and we have less card transactions. And so I'm sorry to Mastercard and Visa to talk about this, but at the same time, we want to promote this as well. So it's not going to be about consumer adoption. It's also about us pushing. So if we get buy now, pay later, or we start using wallets, we want to push these things and say, hey, why don't you pay with this? Obviously, it's going to be a different experience. We're going to pay less. And yeah, so we really, really try to push ourselves to push consumers also to get away from cards.
Wallets already occupy a fair bit of that space, but actually most wallet payments are still actually just card payments, with a different veneer on top. So what's actually changing under the hood?
So can I jump in here?
Please.
Thank you. So Dennis, you and I need definitely have a conversation after this. Trustly works with open banking. For me, open banking has always been, almost like a card, but without the thing in the middle. So it's just going straight, paying from your bank account where you keep your money to where the money needs to go, which is you. Some of our absolutely strongest use cases have been exactly what you described. So we find somebody on the merchant side who's really motivated to drive the adoption of open banking payments.
I'm a fan.
So for me, that is very, very key component, because I think the technology is definitely there to provide what you need in terms of infrastructure. I think we still have, in most geographies in Europe, a little bit more way to go when it comes to consumer adoption. But it definitely works. Yeah, it does. And it's a compelling case to drive that.
No, please.
Yes. Maybe I should speak for the consumer. I think the most important thing is to provide choice. And the way I see it, it's horses for courses. Consumers do like cards. I know they're a bit expensive, but they do like the chargebacks guarantee. They like the convenience of it. They like the ubiquity of it. So you can just, go anywhere in the world with a piece of plastic in your bag, or not even piece of plastic, your phone, and you can pay everywhere. So that level of convenience is something that will be hard to beat. But of course, alternative payment methods are becoming much more user-friendly. So there will be, I think, a natural equilibrium. Certain payment types will prevail in certain instances, large ticket items, for example. But I think there will be space for both cards and non-card payments. I think that's what I predict.
I think you're definitely right. And most payments are still in physical environment, right? And there the user experience with the card is really, really powerful. It will continue to be.
I'm scared, but I have to ask the audience because I'm curious. I don't want to be an outlier, but who thinks that giving consumers choice is a good thing? Would that be? I'm not sure I agree with that, because if you give consumers choice, what happens if it turns out lots of consumers still want to use checks, for example? Lots of consumers, especially older consumers, like using checks. So should you allow, or some people still like using cash, despite the externalized costs on society. So if you say consumers should have a choice, that could have some very perverse consequences. You can't let consumers have a choice unless you make them pay for those choices, right? So it's like, I should be able to use whatever I want as long as I bear the cost of it, right? That's what you mean?
No, what I actually mean is if you are a merchant, the number one priority for you is conversions. So you don't want to miss the sale just because you force someone in a certain payment method. You like to think, what is the audience that you want to attract, and you tailor your payment methods accordingly. So therefore, the choice is yes, certain things I might, as a merchant, decide not to support anymore, and then I may lose like the one old man who still wants to pay with his check, and that's okay. But you do want to go to a broader audience as possible, and that's what I mean by choice. It's also something that the merchants would like. Convergence is everything.
And if I may add on this, actually, this is even more true in Europe, right? Because you have really very different consumer preferences across different geographies, right? Look at e-com or in-store. Indeed, you have, in Nordics, where you're based, or in Italy, where I'm based, right? People want to use different payments methods. So we need to acknowledge for that.
Yeah.
But when you look at conversion and kind of you start to think about kind of the payments value chain, and actually you see in how many steps kind of drops of conversion are lost every time. And actually you think about, let's say, e-wallets, but I would say not the European or American way, but actually the Chinese way. Actually, three-party schemes controlled by one single party, where basically the only step to friction is actually authentication. Basically, they are actually making payment systems with very high conversion. So actually, will there be a point in which actually the card schemes actually get to that level of conversion? Will there be a point where, I mean, most likely you have heard the traditional dilemma of merchants, I want my transaction approved, the issuer declined, and I have no idea why. So will there be a point in which actually merchants and issuers kind of get to talk and actually solve their problems?
I'm very much for this. Of course.
All right, let me ask you the question in a more direct way. Let me give you a scenario that you can respond to. So let's imagine in 5 years' time, right? I get out of the taxi here, and what actually happens then is, because we'll have request to pay in place and variable recurring, all these kind of things. So I get out the taxi, and the taxi bill shows up on my phone, and it says you need to pay the taxi, whatever it was, I can't even remember, 13,000 euros or something, and you have to put I put my thumb on it to pay. There's at least 3 different ways I can imagine that payment will go. It could be pulled over conventional card rails, debit or credit card transaction. It's possible. It could be an account-to-account payment, which will be either a VRP from a variable recurring payment, or it will be a push from my account to the taxi company's account. Or it could by then be a digital euro payment. So my phone will pull down the digital euros from my bank account, send my digital euros to the merchant. Those are 3 equally plausible scenarios for that kind of time. So now tell me, why would consumers either know or even care about which of those paths was being taken? And more to the point, why would merchants want to steer consumers down any path? And you see what I'm pushing towards here. So the consumer experience is, I get out the taxi, it pops up, I put my thumb on it, I'm done. Why would I care which of those mechanisms it is? Like, I want to push you guys a little bit more on this choice side thing.
But I think I'm kind of with you on the point that you're trying to make, and I kind of agree, actually, in a lot of cases. You're in a taxi situation, you don't have much choice, right? So you want to pay it, and whatever works, you're going to use that, right? So in that case, probably the consumer choice isn't that important. You're not going to convert. You're not just going to run away, right, from the taxi. But that very greatly depends on what context you're in. So if you're more of a commoditized business, you have very head-to-head competition, then the ability to offer multiple choices might actually benefit the user experience on that site, right? So you have to, I think, nuance it a little bit more. To go more to your question, I'm obviously sitting here as a representative for trusted open banking solution. My answer is obviously the second one, right?
I guess I'm teasing you guys a little bit more than it seems at first, because my point with that scenario is, to the consumer, it all looks the same.
Yeah, of course.
But to the merchants, it doesn't. To the merchants, it's very different. So how do you resolve this between letting the consumer choose and letting the merchant choose? Because those things have very different implications. So let me just push you a little bit harder on this. In that 5-year scenario, what will merchants want? Never mind what consumers want, because it's all the same to consumers. What do merchants want in 5 years' time?
Actually, I'm going to go back to the consumer side just for a second, because I think that even with these 3 scenarios you said, there will be a difference in paying. So when you're looking at digital wallets versus paying with your card, even if you're paying with your phone, there are different experiences. So for example, if you are using open banking, there is a connection to the bank. If it's not set up, then you have to do this. You have to select your account, things like this. So there is a flow. And users are very, very aware of this. And actually, to your point with increasing conversion, as a merchant, you should know exactly how easy it is and how frictionless. How many steps is it? How many clicks of this button? What is the process? Do you have to go through 3D Secure? These kind of things, you know. So from the consumer experience, I think there is actually a difference. And as the merchant, you should know exactly what that is. And this is what you would kind of go for. Of course, there's fees and stuff like that too. But going back to the consumer, I think you have to be very aware of this.
But let me reply into this. Do you think the merchant should be caring about the different use cases and different experience, or should be us trying to bring the best of it?
We should always, as a merchant, we should always put ourselves in the customer's shoes, as if it was happening to us. Actually, I feel like whenever I had to make payments online, I always have the most problems, I feel like. So it's easy for me to put myself in the consumer's shoes.
I think, David, people will choose what is easier.
Oh!
They will, because let me put it this way. If you have to do, as you say, 2, 3, 4 clicks, the ideal scenario in the future will be you just do 1 click and you're gone.
Exactly. That's my point.
Okay.
So
And it also depends.
Just 1 click.
But it also depends if you have, like, for example, a wallet, what is the payment method underlying in the wallet? Is it account to account? Is it card? Is it whatever payment, as long as it's 1 click payment?
Let me maybe put a parallel with what happens today with cards, right? You have many PSPs that offer you multiple acquirers underlying, and when as merchant you offer that to the consumer, basically the consumer doesn't know which acquirer is being picked. So I think that at the end, the choice is going to be from the merchant. The merchant is going to just have a uniform user experience, and basically that uniform user experience is going to derivate into multiple funding sources, whether it's account to account, whether it's CBDC, or whether it's actually card. And actually, I was having yesterday a discussion about the CBDC topic. Is actually why would that succeed? And I think that ultimately, maybe that alludes to your point, David. Is actually CBDC is great as technology, but it's just a great technology with no use case calling for it, like the metaverse.
I think that's especially because, like, as I say, my point is for the consumer, all these experiences are the same, right? A thing shows up on my phone, I put my thumb on it, the money comes out of my bank account. It makes no difference to the consumer. But whether it's CBDC or a credit card or debit card makes a big difference to the merchant. So how do you, that's what I'm kind of pushing you guys on. I mean, in 5 years, like, it's all very well right now fiddling about with these things, but in 5 years' time, it's not going to be like that. And also, in 5 years' time, you're not going to be asking me because you're going to be asking my AI. You know, you think payments are so interesting that I want to be in that loop? I can't imagine that. You know, like the payments that we make, there's really only 2 different kinds of payments. There are the payments I make getting out the taxi, parking my car, getting on the train. Those payments are so boring. They're so boring. It's cruel of you to involve human beings in that loop. Why would people want to use any of their time? And then there's important payments, like I had to pay for my pension scheme and my savings account before the end of April. Well, those payments are much too important to leave to people like me. And AI should be doing those kind of things. So I'm pushing you again. In 5 years' time, how is this going to resolve? Like, the situation in 5 years' time just can't be the same as the situation is now. It just can't.
No, I mean you're kind of placing the answer a little bit there as well. I mean, clearly it comes down to the efficiency play there. I mean, as a merchant, I want it to work. I want it to be reliable. I'm not trying to wow my end users necessarily with the payment method I'm offering them, right? I'm wowing them with my product. So payments need to be reliable, need to be cost efficient to maintain, as well as to kind of run. So whatever infrastructure emerges that is best catered to do that at scale is eventually going to win, I think.
But are we going to move to some sort of a data-driven type of payments? Basically, just because I'm walking into the tube, basically a payment is going to be triggered to actually pay for my ticket. That's maybe kind of some people, maybe some years in the past, they call that invisible payments. It's like just because you have to pay, you will actually pay.
I mean, I personally, I don't necessarily think so. I think that you want to have at least the bare bones of a payment being sort of an instruction, a verification, and a confirmation. I think people want to kind of make that clear that this is actually my money that I'm giving away. I don't want it to just be sort of invisibly pulled. I think that's one step too many. So yeah, but could probably be certain use cases.
I fully agree with you, and I think that AI at some point will have that limitation. It's like, you can tell me what's the best way to pay here and the way that is less frictionful, but I still want to say, hey, I'm paying or I'm jaywalking.
Yeah.
You're both saying that it's not about the payments meter, also for the merchants, right? It's about the journey that we build with the merchants, at least us as a PSP, to enable that kind of experiences, right? Where the payments is, disappear or it becomes invisible.
But there's going to be and again, I'm genuinely curious as to what you think about this, because I can see a tension there between so for example, use the taxi example again. Like yesterday, I get out the taxi, and of course, I pay with an American Express Platinum card, literally the most expensive possible way. I don't care. I mean, the taxi is charging me the same money. Whether I pay with a debit card that costs them nothing or an American Express card that costs them whatever, I'll pay with the most expensive way possible, and then I get lots of air miles and rewards and all that sort of thing. So that's great for me, but all the other people that are paying with their debit cards are subsidizing my air miles, which I think is great. But I'm not sure if their AI will think that that's great. And what happens when the merchant's AI... What happens when the merchant's AI and the consumer's AI disagree? My AI says, well, I want to pay with my American Express card. And the merchant's AI says, no, I want you to pay with CBDC. And then they have to negotiate. There's going to be a negotiation between the two to come down. Like, how is this all going to work? You guys think everything's going to be the same in 5 years' time. You can't be right.
Okay, so I'll step back in on the merchant side for this one. So let's say that in 5 years, it's super easy to make a payment. It's just one click. So I will take friction completely out of the table.
Right.
So then on the merchant, what do we do? Okay, so you bring up CBDC. That's really interesting. That's a different kind of currency. So I would say from the merchant perspective, we need to think about, okay, what do we do with this currency? So I work for a marketplace, so we do have the pay-ins. We have to do the cash management and the payouts. So then you think, okay, should I have this currency? Should I have a digital currency account? Should I be managing this, or should I be settled in euros, in actual euros? So that's one thing to think about.
But I think Madame Lagarde would be very unhappy to hear you say that. Digital euros are actual euros. That's the point, right?
How are the actual accounts set up? So the way that I see it, I don't see them in the same accounts. And so when you look at the accounting and the bank management, it's actually separate accounts. And when you're doing cash management, it's not a one-for-one. It's not a true like-for-like.
Okay, I'm not going to speak on behalf of the European Central Bank.
I'm a bit too much in the accounting world as well, but yeah, that's something to think about.
But there's another implication to that point, isn't there? Which is, if my AI and the merchant's AI agree to pay with CBDC, right, which probably will happen because that will be the cheapest mechanism, then the money will just go from my wallet to the merchant's wallet. It won't go through banking networks and switches and networks and all this kind of thing. So there are a lot of people that uncharitable people might refer to as parasitic middlemen, but I refer to as customers. There are going to be a lot of people who are going to be bypassed by a CBDC, right? So those examples I gave you, under the hood, actually, they're very different. The merchant choices are going to be quite complex, I think.
I mean, I think that well, you talk about AI as being, replacing your intelligence. First of all, I don't think that's the case. I just think it's a tool. It's like a calculator. And I don't think my calculator is gonna negotiate with your calculator about, anything really. I think it's just like a way.
Have you used ChatGPT?
Yes, I have. Yes, I have.
It's really pretty smart.
Yeah, I know. It is impressive. But it's not making any decisions for me. At least not for me. At least not yet. But second, like on CBDC, I think it is an interesting initiative in theory, but I think it has some huge obstacles. So I doubt that it's going to be used for much in the next 5 years. Actually, I mean, if you think about it, the only difference from digital currency as we have it today is basically I have a liability on the central bank, right? Or they have a liability to me instead, right? Directly to the central bank. But like where we stand right now with, debates around limits on this, fear of actual bank run being triggered by putting it up more digital, like we don't know if it's going to be, tokened or centrally ledger governed. Like there are so many, or like you said with wallets, do I need a separate wallet as a consumer to actually keep it in? It's very confusing to the public, I think. What's the difference between, my Santander pound or my central bank pound? So I'm not sure. I think for me this feels a little bit, to be honest, like politically driven more than anything.
The CBDC, you mean?
Yeah, and it feels a little bit like, okay, there is a solution here. Let's try and find a good problem for it to kind of slot it in, right? With nobody really putting their finger on what it is. Then taking a step back, and you can say on the contrary side of it, yes, the technology, like it is quite interesting. Like you can vastly reduce sort of friction in the payment system. You can do a little bit like what open banking is doing, only directly clearing to the central bank, right? So there should be an efficiency place somewhere there, but I think that's probably 40, 50 years rather than 5 years out.
When you look at the efficiency play, I mean, you can always think, let's say, for single currency, etc., that there is an efficiency play. But I mean, if you think on Dave, you have pounds, right? So how are you going to pay with pounds to the taxi driver that asks you euros? So there will be an intermediary that actually does you that FX. So basically, there will be still places for those intermediaries and those added value service. Well, maybe the taxi driver doesn't care about reconciling the 20 trips a day, but if you are GetYourGuide and you have not 20 payments a day, I hope many multiples more, you will need some technology to actually reconcile, aggregate, and that starts to look very much like a PSP. So there will still be players.
I think also on the digital currency, we need to look at why central banks want digital currencies. It's true, cash is disappearing, so you can't print any more money. I mean, nobody's using printed money anymore. So I think one driver for digital currency is the substitution of cash with digital. Interesting, when you read the latest paper from the Bank of England, they are in a consultation period, and what they want is, rather than certain other countries like China, for example, who have every citizen has a direct bank account with the central bank, the Bank of England is inviting wallet providers, again, to be the intermediaries, quote unquote, of these digital currencies. That's a missed opportunity, in my humble opinion, because you could have a situation where every citizen has a bank account and, payments like benefits and the rest could be paid directly into these bank accounts. We as payment providers, we will still be able to incorporate these payments into our ecosystem, create acceptance for these type of payments in the same way as cash.
Well, this brings us back around to the wallet point again, because I think one of the other things that's going on in the background is we have the EU digital identity wallet in this 5-year time scenario. I would imagine, unless people in the audience are going to tell me this is wrong, in 5 years' time, everybody in this audience, everybody that gets out of that taxi, will have an EU digital ID wallet. It would seem rather obvious that those wallets will be connected to bank accounts. We have SEPA Instant, all this kind of thing. So is it possible that in 5 years' time, all of these things basically just go away because everybody just pays account to account using their EU digital ID wallets? Is that another potential scenario?
I would say in 5 years' time, it's a bit soon. I don't think that, but I think things are heading this way. So I think in 5 years' time, what you were saying before with the 3 selections, I still think that would be applicable. Now, I'm happy you talk about AI, because I think this does play a role. And we can joke about ChatGPT and things like this, but when you ask, as a merchant, how would you select the type of payment method that you would like the customer to pay. I think actually in 5 years, the AI would decide that. So right now, how is it? So you say, okay, our consumers have 3 different ways to pay.
Wait, hold on. You're saying
Yeah.
in 5 years' time, you won't be using consultants anymore?
No
Well,
consultants.
this is a tragic vision of the future. I
Just
didn't realize that.
ChatGPT consultants, but also in the underlying infrastructure to say, instead of me making rules to say, okay, if consumer is in this country and if this currency, blah, 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 then let them pay with, give them these options. No, it's not going to be hard rules anymore. It's going to be AI. Who is this customer? Have they been on our platform before? What have they paid with before? What do they prefer? What kind of external data can we get? And the AI will select, let's say, give them in order what is best for them, what is also good for us as well, because the AI knows what's going to be cheapest for us and find the optimal solutions. So AI already exists right now. I would say in the world of fraud prevention, there's a lot of machine learning and AI, but it's really starting to get into, let's say, payment orchestration. You also mentioned this. I think AI should be driving where things should be going.
You know, if you look at the speed at which ChatGPT, I know it's just one example, but if you look at the speed with which it's developed, just in the space of the last couple of months, you know, all of a sudden now we've got plugins for hundreds of different applications. On Twitter yesterday, I saw a picture of Boris Johnson being arrested by some policemen, and I was like, yeah. And then it all turned out to be a fake. It was just made up by AI. Like, literally, how quickly that's happened. It's gone from being, oh, this is an interesting academic thing, to literally everybody in this audience now has incredible AI resources that they can bring to bear on any problem. I just find it very hard to believe that in this 5-year horizon that we're talking about, that isn't going to become the dominant factor. It's going to be more important than all of the other technologies put together, surely.
But I think it's definitely a tool that will be used, just like computing, and there will be a lot of use cases coming out of it. But I think also coming back to the point about digital currency, I mean, also we have to remember, like, the last sort of 150 years of development in the world has basically been driven by credit, right? So, and I don't think the central banks are going to start giving out credit just because they have digital currency there. It's still debit payment. And while consumer likes that, like, the banking system will have to...
I'm certain you're 100% correct about that. But what that means is that there'll be a separation between banking and payments. Yeah, so we've been through a period where basically banks run payment networks. Yeah. And when you go... Like you say, this has got nothing to do with credit, which is what banking's about. So why would it be run by the same people? The payments networks could be run by anybody in that example. It won't just be banks, right?
If you can use it as a more efficient clearing mechanism, sure. But that's basically what we're already solving with open banking today, right?
How come none of you have mentioned Bitcoin so far? Like last year, everyone was going on about Bitcoin. That's still a thing, or is it?
Yeah.
Well, I still want to have €2 tomorrow in my wallet.
You have what?
I still want to have the €2 that I have today in my wallet, not €1.50. It's just a matter of...
I think life has changed significantly, David, on the crypto side since last year. I mean, I think Bitcoin is the only one that's not been declared a security or an asset at the moment. So,
Sorry, but it's true, right? You mentioned EID, we mentioned CBDC. Also, we can mention EPI, right? There is an acceleration towards wallet on the consumer side that you can imagine, right? And then whether it's a card race or account on the back of it, right? They're going to use the wallet. So if you go back to your taxi, they're going to have a wallet. So one problem solved on the side. On the other side, the merchants, right, need to orchestrate all of this, right? And they need to have someone supporting in an agnostic way all the payments methods, embedding this into their journey. So I think is rather is less a discussion about how I accept, what's the fees, but better how can I integrate this into my business that I need to grow and manage, right?
That's what SPAA is going to do, right? It's like in theory at least that kind of coordination. But I think again you have this same kind of issue, which is about the consumer merchant nexus, if you like, relationship, which is that for a lot of these things, it's not clear to me that it will be consumers that are making the choices. It's just not interesting enough to consumers. Like to work out how to pay to get me the most air miles or to get me the most cash back or whatever. I don't want to use up my brain space for that. I want my wallet to do that kind of thing for me. So, and that is a change from where we are now, because we've grown up in an environment where it's consumers that are making these choices. But I'm not sure that in 5 years' time it will be the consumers making the choices.
But if you remember, I think a couple of years back, before EMV was a thing in the US, there used to be those apps actually where you could load multiple of your credit cards, actually, and it became a plastic card, and then you could select, based on your preferences for that day or whatever, which actual pan is actually being used for that piece of plastic. And eventually that actually can turn into something very similar, because the plastic is just a form factor. So effectively, you are going to have basically your phone where you load all your things, and then your phone is going to think whatever is more optimal for right now. You present your card or whatever form factor you have there, and something in the back is going to figure out, hey, this is going to be paid with your Amex because I'm getting points in this taxi, or because I'm in McDonald's, or this is going to be paid with account to account because of something else.
That's I think.
And also,
right.
Some merchants might incentivize customers because of loyalty points associated with a particular payment method. I mean, there's lots of things, as you say, that could be part and parcel of your wallet that is a more of intelligent wallet. I think you're, though, painting a very dystopian view, David, a view that humans will have no will, and I don't believe that for a minute.
I'm not being anti-human. I just...
I think there's much more left in the old human
I think we gave it our best shot. We just wasn't good enough, I think, is the...
Yeah, no, I don't believe that for a moment.
I'm not sure, Chad. All right, look, for the last 5 minutes, I want you to be futuristic now. I want to hear... I think we've brought out some of the key issues for the audience, but I just want to address you personally. Give me your little piece of futurism for the 5-year horizon. Start at the far end. What do you see as being a big change in that 5-year timescale?
Let's talk about something that we didn't mention so far. So we talk about CBDC, which I think is going to be a question of when, not if, right? So let's talk on the other side, on the merchant sides. We've seen over the last years the journey into omni-channel for merchants, right? Preferences by consumers and by merchants to go in that direction, right? By conversion rates, by consumer preferences. Let's take a step forward. I think that in 5 years, it's going to be much more immersive. So metaverse is something that you mentioned at the very beginning in the opening remarks. AR, VR, social commerce to the next level, right? There's going to be the kind of embedded experience that we'll all have, right? And in that place, in that future, payment is going to be ubiquitous and somehow, right, contextual to your shopping experience.
Dennis, what do you think?
Yep, I'm actually going to go back to AI. Because I would say, if I were to ask everybody here in the audience, what processes do you have that were actually made by humans? If you look at your payment stack, if you look at the business rules, you look at the hard code, these were rules that were probably made by humans. I really think this is changing. We are, like I mentioned before, in the, let's say, fraud space, where we're trusting more machine learning. And it's scary. Like, adoption, I think, is very scary for machine learning because you have to trust them. It is kind of a black box. And the AI is telling you how to run your business. Is it going to be better than the rules that us humans made? But once we break this barrier and we start using it more and changing these processes that we have internally, I think this is where things are going.
Olof, don't give away any company secrets, but what's your 5-year vision?
I'll try. I think certainly open banking will grow tremendously online. I think that we'll see that growth fast in the UK, then followed by sort of parts of Europe, Germany, France, Spain, and Italy, probably a little bit behind the curve, but it will come as well. I think cash will be deleted. Like in Sweden already, I'm Swedish, as you can hear from my accent, right? I got some cash a couple of weeks ago because I had some refund in a check from the government for something. Not a lot of money, but so I tried to buy a coffee. I couldn't. I went to 3 different places. I literally couldn't. I'm like, here, this is like $2. Can I get a coffee? Like, no, we don't accept cash anymore. So I ended up. I could pay at a gas station. That was it, right? So, and that's Sweden for you now. And I think this is going to happen right across. And then obviously that carries with it some, spill-on effects that you need to be able to pay in an efficient and seamless way digitally with the money you have in your account. So yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Francesc.
So on my side, I have the impression that actually what's going to be the next year is actually the obsession on conversion, and whether it's obsession on, let's say, using some sort of intelligent routing that actually use real or fake intelligence to actually select what's the best methodology to pay. That's going to be one thing. Whether it's that obsession actually goes on actually improving collaboration between the different parties in the existing ecosystems, whether it's issuers and merchants or whether it's something else. I think that it's going to be about getting more obsessed about not losing a single cent or a single basis point, because, I mean, recession is going to come. The question is when.
Yeah, that's a good point. Maria?
I would say payments will follow where commerce is going, and commerce is going to be digital by default. So therefore, the prediction for me is like cash in 5 years gone. Lots of digital payment methods out there that can be used, interoperability between them, and with merchants playing a much more greater use in harnessing the data that comes from payments as opposed to payment itself. The payment itself will be a transactional thing that just happens, but the data that you can get out of it and the way in which a merchant will use it, that will be of more value.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Maria. Listen, I had a fantastic panel of people who had a lot of different perspectives on our industry. They genuinely didn't know what I was going to ask them. They gave you their honest opinions from a very expert position. I hope you appreciated that as much as I did. Thank you very much, panel.
Yeah.
That was terrific.